Alright, I happen to be sitting at my computer right now as the last set of week 5 has just finished. They got an extension, but that's the advantage of pushing these things later in the week. I don't have to worry about anything like that. It will be covered in this video. But first, we got to go through the rest of week 5 in this Prismatic Draft League season. You may have already seen my set for the week. If not, click away and go watch it right now. Our Halifax Masquerade men got absolutely bodied, and we're going to have to come back strong in week 6, but there, of course, were 5 other sets played as well, with a lot of implications for the standings in the playoff race. Those standings going into week 5 are what you see right here, previously featured in the other video this week, as I am now doing them in both, so that everybody goes into all of these with a fresh picture of what the situation is. So if you have watched my week 5 set, obviously it's not reflected here. I'm pretty sure the Halifax Masquerade men are not in 3rd place anymore. But going into week 5, we were in that 3-1 block of teams there, trying to shore up our playoff position. The Peaceful Porygons, the only team still undefeated, and then a bunch of other teams chasing behind us. And finally, before we get to the replays for this week, there was one trade. Overall, not a lot of trades this season compared to last. Once again, I think people are generally fairly happy with their teams. But, yeah, we do have one trade, and it is the Alberta Arcanine dropping Hisuian Typhlosion and picking up Ceruledge. Now, there is an obvious loss in sort of immediate explosive offensive power here. Typhlosion could pair very well with Volbeat or Ninetales to just throw off powerful eruptions and try to break through teams quickly. But I actually do think this trade makes a lot of sense for this team, because this is a team that doesn't, from what we've seen of their replays in the first half of the season, they don't tend to play that kind of fast-paced offensive game plan, and they don't really have the pieces for it apart from Typhlosion and its immediate supports itself. I think that Ceruledge being able to play a bulkier game with setup options if they want, or probably having a few different ways that it can play. I haven't looked very closely at Ceruledge in a while, but there are probably some other sets it can run besides just like bulk up or sword stance stuff. But the bulky setup mode is the obvious approach to take with it, and I think that does play a little bit more to what we've seen in terms of this team's strengths so far. With the Smeargle able to support that, the Volbeat still there for Sunny Day or Tailwind, or I think it gets Encore, so it could help Ceruledge get set up that way. You still have the Porygon Z for explosive offense if you want to try that, but yeah, bulkier, slower Pokemon like a Lapras and a Lomomola, and especially the support from the likes of Smeargle and Chansey, I think do lend themselves to a Ceruledge-centered game plan more than a Hisuian Typhlosion one. So even though Hisuian Typhlosion is very strong in this format, I do think I like this trade for this team, and I think it makes a lot of sense. With that said, that is the only trade this week, so it is now time to go ahead and jump into the replays, where I believe we will be seeing Ceruledge make its season debut. And when I said that, I actually didn't realize that the Ceruledge would be in the very first set in the lineup this week, but here we are. Marvelous Bridge Malamars versus Alberta Arcanine. Indeed, the season debut for Ceruledge, joined by both of those bulky water types I mentioned in Alomomola and Lapras. We've generally seen the Lapras click Sheer Cold. I don't know if it'll have a different game plan this time, but we'll see. I am definitely interested in whether the Ceruledge can set up. It might have its work cut out for it into Pokemon like Malamar and Honchkrow, and even Midnight Form Lycanroc, but maybe its Terra type will give a surprise there. We still have the Volbeat without a Typhlosion to support, so I'm not the most familiar with Volbeat's move pool. It'll be interesting to see what kind of prankster techs it has for this team. I mean, Tailwind could still make a lot of sense, especially if they are trying to get those one-hit KOs with the Lapras, but we'll see. Then we have Smeargle, which of course could be doing anything, but it has tended to go for normal type attacks like Population Bomb in a lot of these sets, try to rack up damage itself. And the Primeape is a little bit of a wild card too, but actually with the Smeargle, they could be doing like a beat-up Rage Fist strat or something. We'll just have to find out. On the Marvelous Bridge Malamars side, I am not going to lie, I've only just now noticed that Magikarp. I did glance at their paste, but it was days ago, and I'd forgotten that they brought the Magikarp this week. But sure enough, there it is, flopping around, almost hidden by Honchkrow's much larger body. We have the Honchkrow and the Malamar able to possibly pose some problems for a Ceruledge game plan. We have dual fighting types in Blaziken and Decidueye able to threaten the likes of Lapras. Smeargle is threatened by pretty much everything because it just doesn't have very high stats. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know the game plan for this team, but they definitely have coverage into anything that the Arcanine can throw at them here. But the real mystery is the Magikarp, and I'm looking forward to finding out whether it comes to a game. Let's find out now. So, we see Smeargle and Primeape leading against Decidueye and Malamar. There might well be some kind of Rage Fist plan here, although Primeape not being a ghost type, I don't know that Rage Fist is necessarily a very valuable attack for it into either of these Pokemon. In particular, it might have to watch out for the Malamar because of the... Well, Malamar is a Psychic type, but also it's not weak to Rage Fist. But yeah, that Psychic typing, it could throw off a Psycho Cut, it could try to boost itself up with something like a Superpower into Smeargle. Definitely a dynamic first turn with a few different ways that it can go. I guess that's pretty much always how it is when you see Smeargle in closed team sheet. But Malamar actually going for a Rain Dance, as Smeargle does target a Population Bomb into Primeape, not doing very much damage, so Smeargle... maybe actually trying to use the Population Bomb to support his teammate this game. Well, it's actually... the damage is kind of adding up. Okay, wait, what happened here? Okay, maybe it's not the offensive Smeargle we've seen before. Maybe this one is more support-oriented. But Primeape actually locked into Outrage after the Population Bomb, which... I'm trying to see Primeape's abilities. Were they just trying to crit the Primeape to activate Anger Point? That's the best guess that I have right now. Or maybe they think that the Rage Fist stack might be useful later, although locking yourself into Outrage in front of this Malamar without even terrestrializing, and even the Decidueye, right, could be carrying coverage for Primeape. You're really running the risk that Primeape will not be around for the long term in this game, so if they're trying to make a longer term play with the Rage Fist, that's not really what this looks like to me, but again, I don't know the game plans here. If you're trying to activate Anger Point, you could run Frost Breath Smeargle to do that more smoothly. But, hey, Smeargle only has 4 move slots. Maybe they did just Population Bomb their own Primeape to see if they would happen to get a crit. In 10 attacks, it's not a terrible chance. You know, Mousehold crits all the time with Population Bomb, at least in my experience using it, so... that may be what they were cooking here. I don't know. Maybe someone will leave a comment to let me know. But yeah, maybe Population Bomb is here to boost Rage Fist and have a chance to activate Anger Point, and they just don't have room for Frost Breath in the set. That's what I'm trying to say there. Anyway, the Outrage doesn't knock out the Decidueye, which sets Tailwind. So Primeape might be in danger here, but actually Malamar will take the KO on Smeargle first. Of course, it will get that defense boost from the Superpower. Triple Arrows almost knocks out Primeape, but not quite. And Outrage will finish off the Decidueye here. Primeape still not confused, still locked into that Outrage. Here comes the Honchkrow with Tailwind up. Malamar gets an easy boost, finishing off the Primeape. And Honchkrow going straight for a Hurricane into a Alomomola. That does a little bit more than half, so nice damage there. And we begin to see the point of the Rain Dance Malamar. I do kind of wonder whether they were also trying to prep. I mean, this is obviously after the Hisuian Typhlosion was traded out. It's not impossible that the Malamar idea was before Hisuian Typhlosion was dropped. But maybe it's also a little bit of prep for the Ceruledge to weaken its recovery with Bitter Blade. But yeah, the Hurricane Honchkrow takes advantage of that Rain Dance pretty nicely. Another Hurricane might finish Alomomola off. We see the Lapras here. Malamar no longer has Contrary thanks to the skill swap, so it can't so freely spam Superpower anymore. Superpower might still be worthwhile into this Lapras, although you'd think sooner or later something on the Arcanine side will terrestrialize. In any case, knockoff removing the Assault Vest is pretty solid there. Another Hurricane does knock out the Alomomola. We see that it's Moxie Honchkrow, so probably running a mixed attacking set, right? And that makes sense then of why you'd use Hurricane for an especially strong flying attack and then Rain Dance to support it. The Honchkrow is probably packing a physical attack or two as well, and might well be more invested in its attack stat, or maybe it isn't and it's just counting on Moxie boosts to get the attack stat up there. In any case, the Lapras goes for Sparkling Aria, which I believe would damage its teammate, except the Alomomola has already fainted, so no problem there. It does decent damage in the rain to both Pokemon. And we see Terra Electric Lapras, but it's going to get knocked out by the combination of Knockoff and Hurricane here. We have that that weird pixel above the Honchkrow model that has bugged me before when I had Honchkrow on my team some drafts ago. But that's neither here nor there. Alright, we definitely saw a lot of creativity from both of these coaches this week, but in the end, the Marvelous Bridge, or in this game, I mean, there obviously is still more for them to play. This was only game 1, but in the end, the Marvelous Bridge Malamars kept up the offensive pressure. The Malamar was able to set itself up pretty easily there, and they came out on top. Well, if there was an Anger Point play with the Smeargle, it just didn't work out this game. But Game 2, still anyone's guess what's going to happen, considering the creativity that these two teams have shown so far this week. So let's just jump right in. We got Smeargle and Primeape leading once again. Are they going to go for it again? But now it's Magikarp and Blaziken on the other side. The Magikarp has come to a game, and I paused a little bit late, so we know that it will not be a side population bomb into Primeape this time. Instead, the Lapras switches in. Blaziken just protecting. Smeargle going for no retreat, so this Smeargle does want to do damage after all. I guess Population Bomb doesn't hit the Primeape too terribly hard if they want to try to set it up, but then also the no retreat is an option to get Smeargle started with some quick stat boosts faster than Moody, and then the Population Bomb might do more damage to opponents. The Magikarp just goes right for a Flail. It does literally 3% to Lapras, but Lapras will now drop to a close combat. So hey, if Lapras had a Focus Sash, that Flail would have mattered here. We know that it doesn't, though. We know that it has an Assault Vest. So the Flail probably didn't contribute anything, but hey, could have broken a Sash on something. Anyway, yeah, Lapras is just knocked out. Smeargle goes for Boom Burst. So this is actually a special attacking Smeargle. Probably like a modest or timid nature to lower the Population Bomb damage so it can support Primeape. But the Arcanine not giving up on doing damage with the Smeargle, and that Boom Burst blasted Magikarp out of existence and nearly did the same to Blaziken. Pretty impressive coming from a Smeargle. Does lose its speed drop to Moody there, and we see the Hisuian Decidueye come in, but there's the Ceruledge. We see Terra Normal Smeargle just get one-shot by a Flare Blitz. However, the Malamars have now traded Blaziken for Smeargle. Not necessarily the best trade. We see the Terra fighting Hisuian Decidueye. That will take a Bitter Blade better than it would have before Terra, but it still doesn't take it very well. Shadow Claw does a lot to Ceruledge, but it also activates weak armor. We saw that the Ceruledge was faster already, but it's certainly going to be faster now. Little bit of wishful thinking there maybe in the chat, but now the Primeape comes back in. Ceruledge can take the KO on Decidueye pretty safely, and we see the Midnight form Lycanroc. It actually misses the KO with Psychic Fangs on Ceruledge. Not sure why it went for Psychic Fangs instead of a Rock type attack. I mean, maybe it doesn't have a Dark attack, but it probably has Rock Stab. And we know that the Arcanine have already used their Terra, but it doesn't really matter because this close combat from the Primeape will knock Lycanroc out. So, I hate to say it, but the Magikarp might have been a little bit of a throw in this game. In Game 1, the Malamars were able to keep up offensive pressure, set up the Malamar, and the Arcanine just couldn't hold up against that pressure, although if they crit their own Primeape, it might have made a difference. This game, the Magikarp is really not putting out any significant pressure, and the Arcanine were able to overwhelm, with also the adjustment that they got the Smeargle going offensively instead of trying to support the Primeape with it, and I'd say the Ceruledge made a pretty significant difference there as well. That the Malamars do have coverage for Ceruledge, and we'll probably see... They didn't bring either Dark-type to Game 2, we'll probably see at least one of them in Game 3, but the Ceruledge was definitely a good adjustment for the Arcanine in this game, and I definitely like the weak armor tech there. Game 3, who can possibly say what's going to happen? We see Smeargle leading with Lapras this time, not Primeape, against Honchkrow and Malamar. Both Dark types, and Smeargle is going right on the offense. Terra Normal immediately. We see the Rain Dance Malamar again. The Boom Burst doesn't do too much to anyone. Honchkrow sets Tailwind, but drops to a Thunderbolt from Lapras. Maybe no Sheer Cold this week. Lapras putting in some real work already there. Smeargle gets a speed boost from Moody. That's probably good for it in the face of this Tailwind. We see Blaziken protect to get its own speed boost. Malamar lands a superpower into Lapras. Doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does boost Malamar. But I kind of wonder what this Boom Burst is going to do. Not that much. Malamar's okay. Smeargle gets knocked out by its partner Sparkling Aria. They traded Smeargle for Malamar though, so that's not the worst thing. Malamar can't set up and sweep this game. That said, the Blaziken is looking very well positioned with a speed boost and Tailwind against the slow HP Lapras. And we see the Decidueye follow up. We see Volbeat on the other side. Volbeat not threatening much in terms of offense. However, we do see it trick a Power Anklet onto Blaziken. Power Anklet, like all of the power items, will lower the holder's speed stat. Unfortunately, Blaziken is probably the worst target for that because Blaziken can just speed boost out of it over time. As we see, Blaziken does go next anyway. Acrobatics, unboosted. In other words, Blaziken is holding an item. Does not quite have to Volbeat, but more importantly, the Lapras is knocked out here. The Volbeat is probably not much of an offensive threat. The Blaziken with the Power Anklet still boosting its speed. Tailwind still up for one more turn. Flare Blitz in the rain knocks out Volbeat no problem, and now Ceruledge stands alone against admittedly two fighting types, but yeah, that Shadow Claw from Decidueye does a lot. Blaziken takes an unboosted Psycho Cut, and do they have Shadow Sneak? Maybe not, but the Ceruledge is boosting its speed with the weak armor. Maybe it just doesn't need Shadow Sneak here. Bitter Blade in rain, though, not doing too much to the Decidueye, and Blaziken almost closes this out with an Acrobatics. The weak armor proving to be kind of a double-edged sword, if you will, as Ceruledge is not taking these hits very well, and Decidueye will finish it off with the Shadow Claw. So, I hate to say it, but one of the differences in this set genuinely was whether Magikarp came to a game or not. The two games without Magikarp, the Marvelous Bridge Malamars were able to keep up their offensive pressure and overwhelm the Arcanine. The one game with Magikarp was a different story. That said, the speed boost Blaziken put in a lot of work here. I like the Rain Dance Malamar. I like the Hurricane Honchkrow. Everything flowed together pretty seamlessly in 2 out of 3 games, and that was all the Marvelous Bridge Malamars needed to take this one home. Up next, we have the regional Reshirams taking on the Azurbe Chatots. The Chatots back to their Volcarona, Oricorio, possible Dancer combos with a bunch of support Pokemon around them in Meowstic, Dedenne, and Quagsire, and then the Corviknight able to set up as well. So probably some kind of setup game plan, but a couple of different ways that they can go about it. But there does seem to be a pretty clear divide here between setup Pokemon and support Pokemon, unless they're going to pull out some crazy surprise. On the Reshiram side, we see the possible Trick Room core of Chandelure, Gallade, Amoonguss, and Porygon 2. So Porygon 2, very reliable Trick Room setter, although Chandelure and Gallade can also set it up. Chandelure and Gallade will both hit very hard, and they complement each other in terms of what targets they hit hard. And then, of course, Amoonguss is a menace under Trick Room, being one of the slowest Pokemon in the game and able to spread Spore. But the Reshirams also not bringing a Trick Room dependent game plan, as we have the Braviary probably carrying Tailwind like we've seen in the past, so that Chandelure and Gallade can hit quickly instead of slowly, if that's what they consider to be the best game plan. And then the Jolteon able to outspeed anything on the other side, and definitely an offensive threat to Corviknight and Oricorio, though not so much into some of the other Pokemon here. Game 1 starts off with Volcarona and Oricorio leading against Jolteon and Braviary, so it looks like this is the fast game plan from the regional Reshirams here. Volcarona goes straight for Terra Fairy, but immediately takes a Thunder Wave. Jolteon takes the Revelation Dance, and a Rock Slide from Braviary does not knock anything out thanks to the Volcarona having Terastallized, but the Volcarona now has to worry about Flinch as well as Full Para thanks to the Thunder Wave, and Oricorio does take a lot of damage there. Volcarona does get the Quiver Dance off though, and that means Oricorio does too. But is Jolteon still faster? Oh, no it isn't. And it'll get knocked out by that Revelation Dance. However, Braviary gets the chance to go for a Sky Attack. We see the Power Herb Sky Attack combination again. It knocks out Volcarona, even though its flying weakness has been turned off. No problem for such a powerful attack. The Braviary might be carrying Acrobatics like we've seen in the past to hit almost as hard now that it has no item. We see Corviknight come in on the other side. Now Jolteon has been removed, so Corviknight is... there could excuse me, there could still be Chandelure in the back, but Corviknight is relatively well positioned here. Potentially. Gallade going for the Terra Psychic really wants to hit something hard, I guess. Or it just wants to turn off its flying weakness, but it doesn't matter, it gets knocked out by that Ghost Revelation Dance. So a bit of a waste for the Terra there, but we do see Braviary set the Tailwind finally. Corviknight going for Bulk Up, and it is Chandelure in the back. The Chatots have already used their Terra. Oricorio is knocked out by an Acrobatics. Chandelure just going for Haze, actually. Maybe thinking that it can't one-shot the Corviknight here, so it needs to minimize damage, although it still takes a lot from that unboosted Brave Bird. And now it's Quagsire in the back. Braviary Rock Slide, Chandelure Heat Wave. Misses Quagsire, probably wouldn't do much anyway. Might be hoping the Quagsire flinches here if you're the Reshirams. It does not, but it just goes for a Liquidation into Braviary, doesn't do too much, and the Reshirams can probably close this one out from here, as we see Acrobatics and normal Terra Blast. Remains to be seen what the Chandelure's Terra type is, but that attack is enough on the last turn of Tailwind to finish off the Quagsire. And so the fast game plan from the regional Reshirams has paid off very nicely here. And we'll see how the Chatots adjust. That's really all there is to say, right? This time it's Meowstic leading with Dedenne. So the two Pokemon we didn't see in Game 1 against Jolteon and Chandelure. Jolteon protecting, and Meowstic sets a light screen, as Dedenne does a lot to Chandelure with that Volt Switch. Wow. Meowstic takes the Dark Pulse reasonably well after the light screen, forces Chandelure off the field. With Quagsire next to it, we see the Terra flying Jolteon, avoiding a possible ground attack from the Quagsire, I guess. Braviary coming in also means that any ground coverage is useless. Meowstic paralyzed, of course it still has Prankster. And they're getting off little bits of damage here and there, but nothing crazy so far. However, we see the Meowstic going for the Helping Hand. Quagsire survives the Sky attack from Braviary and knocks it out back with Liquidation. And so the Chatots are putting up better resistance here, but honestly, with Quagsire low, Meowstic low and paralyzed, some very strong Pokemon showing up on the Reshiram side, like Gallade, and then the Chandelure is still there in the back. To me, it kind of feels right now like the Chatots are still on the back foot, but they are pulling it off so far. As we see Dedenne come back in. The Dedenne has been a bit of a menace this game, admittedly, as it takes that Thunderbolt just fine. Gallade will finish off Quagsire. Meowstic is back and fully paralyzed, so whatever support it was going for there doesn't work. But the Jolteon's flying Terra Blast and Light Screen is not doing a whole lot to this Dedenne either, and that Dazzling Gleam does a lot of damage back. Gallade going for Sacred Sword again into Meowstic, knocking it out. I kind of wonder whether Gallade is choiced, and that's why it's not targeting the Dedenne, since of course that will resist Sacred Sword, being a Fairy type. So if it is a choice-locked Gallade, that might be a problem actually for the Reshirams in this endgame. We now see the Volcarona come in. It's not choice-locked. Gallade going for Protect. I'm not sure why it prioritized KOing Meowstic over Dedenne there, but maybe I just missed something. Flying Terra Blast will be stopped by the Protect as Jolteon is knocked out by a Dazzling Gleam, and now we see Chandelure come in, but I think Dedenne might just win this. Okay, the Volcarona knocks Chandelure out with Psychic, and then Dedenne just wins this. Dedenne put in crazy work in this game. I called it a support Pokemon, but what are this thing's stats? It wasn't like getting one-shots or anything, but it was one of the faster Pokemon on the board. It wasn't afraid of the Terra flying Jolteon, and it was actually doing pretty solid damage with the Dazzling Gleam and even the Volt Switch. So as we head into Game 3 here, if you're the regional Reshirams, maybe this is where you want a Trick Room plan and you bring the Amoonguss to try to keep the Dedenne in check. That's plausible. Or even the Porygon 2 might take its hits better than, you know, something like Gallade with the Fairy weakness, or Chandelure just not being as bulky. That's my first thought here, but maybe they have their own way to handle Dedenne, and we'll find out by jumping right in here, as it is Meowstic, Dedenne leading against Jolteon and Amoonguss. There is the Amoonguss, but the fact that they brought Jolteon suggests, once again, not a hard Trick Room mode. Meowstic will set Light Screen and take that Thunderbolt pretty well, but look at how little Amoonguss took from Volt Switch, right? Dedenne was able to go wild in Game 2, but Amoonguss is a really solid check to it. However, Amoonguss does have issues with Corviknight, but not if it lands a Spore like it did right there. We see Terra Electric Corviknight tanking the Thunderbolt, no problem, but it will stay asleep this turn. Meowstic lands a Psychic into Amoonguss, but even that doesn't do too terribly much. As we see the Citrus Berry getting Amoonguss healthy again, it can probably also switch out and use Regenerator. Corviknight showing Sleep Talk, so it actually is definitely built to check this Amoonguss. But it goes, and it rolls Brave Bird, but targets it into Jolteon, not Amoonguss. Bit of bad luck there. As Amoonguss tries to put Meowstic to sleep, but Meowstic shows Safety Goggles. Now Jolteon switching out to Gallade and Amoonguss to Braviary. Double switch from the Reshirams. Meowstic still chipping things with Psychic, but not really doing that much damage as Corviknight rolls Roost with its Sleep Talk, missing an opportunity to Brave Bird Gallade or something like that. Gallade showing the Terra Psychic. Not going to take as much from a Brave Bird anymore, as Braviary gets a Sky Attack crit that I'm not confident matters to knock out Meowstic, but honestly Meowstic was maybe a bit of a liability to the Chatots at this point. I mean, I know they like having the light screen up, but Meowstic is just not doing that much with those Psychics. I don't know. It has Helping Hand, right? It could do that in a different position. Corviknight takes a lot from the Sacred Sword, but wakes up and lands a Brave Bird. However, Gallade will survive that with the fighting typing turned off, and now Amoonguss is in to wall Dedenne and Quagsire. Braviary's Acrobatics does good damage into Quagsire. Jolteon coming back in. Not going to take the Dazzling Gleam very well, but Amoonguss still does. Quagsire showing the Recover, but Dedenne is now taking a nap. And Jolteon just going for the normal Terra Blast, chipping Quagsire. High Horsepower actually doing a fair bit to Amoonguss, but Sludge Bomb doing more to Dedenne. And it's a positioning battle now, but with the Dedenne being knocked out by a Terra Blast, the Reshirams seem to have the edge, as they also switch Braviary in on its High Horsepower immunity. Chatots down to their last two Pokemon. Normal Terra Blast takes out Electric-type Corviknight. Quagsire takes a lot from that Acrobatics. Braviary will be knocked out, and so will Jolteon, but Quagsire now at 1%. Didn't click Recover this turn, and even a Sludge Bomb from Amoonguss could probably knock it out, but Gallade has it covered with the Sacred Sword. So Amoonguss, in the end, I mean, Dedenne put in so much work in Game 2. The problem is it's pretty much hard countered by Amoonguss, and Amoonguss, I would say, really made the difference in this game, as both players were switching around a lot. It was a tough positioning battle, but Amoonguss being able to land Spores made the positioning that much harder for the Chatots, right? Pivoting Dedenne in and out is fine, but if Dedenne is asleep, then there's just not much that you can accomplish from that. And the Corviknight running Sleep Talk was a good tech, and it could have really made a difference here. It had a real chance a couple of times to knock something out if it rolled a Brave Bird into the correct target with Sleep Talk, but that's a very luck-based idea, and the luck just didn't work out for the Chatots this time. So in the end, yeah, I'd say Amoonguss MVP of this set. Corviknight had a chance, but things just didn't break its way. And the regional Reshirams take what I think is their second consecutive win, and are very much looking to charge up the playoff, up into a playoff spot here in the second half of the season after admittedly a tough first half for them. They seem to be getting into good form now. Next, we have the Peaceful Porygons taking on the Liberty Garden Garchomps. The Garchomps running a very familiar mode at this point, with Tyranitar setting the sand for two strong ground-type attackers in Garchomp and Excadrill. Skarmory is here as the flying-type partner. You can click Earthquake next to it pretty safely. It's probably also here to help check the Ursaluna, because, yeah, physical Ursaluna, the non-Blood Moon kind, doesn't have great coverage for Skarmory generally, and it is sort of the most individually threatening Pokemon on the Porygon side, so this makes a lot of sense as a matchup to bring Skarmory. Then we have the Clefable, which has a lot of tricks up its sleeve and rounds out the coverage with his team very nicely, and the Duosion threatening possible Trick Room game plan if the Porygons go for a very fast mode, maybe something like Charizard, Jumpluff, Sun. There are no Charizard and Jumpluff in this matchup, however. Makes sense into Tyranitar. Instead, we do see the Ursaluna. We also see the Gastrodon able to... Gastrodon has a number of different ways that it can threaten the strongest attackers on the other side. Obviously, ground and water coverage into Tyranitar. And Excadrill, it could run ice coverage for Garchomp. It can run Yawn and Recover and stuff. So a few different ways to play Gastrodon, but it makes a lot of sense in this matchup. Then we see Indeedee and Hitmonlee, which suggests possible Unburden stuff, and Hitmonlee using its fighting coverage to threaten the likes of Tyranitar and Excadrill. Plus, who knows what its Terra type is, it could have some other coverage. Mimikyu, on the other hand, able to set Trick Room for Ursaluna, so they have fast and slow ways to play this. I'm guessing that's what the Mimikyu is here for. And then, once again, Chatots may be looking to finally get that Belly Drum sweep that it has attempted unsuccessfully in the past. We'll see if it can pull it off this time, as Hitmonlee and Ursaluna are leading against Tyranitar and Excadrill. So there's immediate offensive pressure from the Garchomps, especially if it's Terra Flying Tyranitar, but A switch to Indeedee, activating a Psychic Seed on Hitmonlee could shake this up, maybe, but it's a tricky position, I would say. Instead, the Tyranitar switches out for Duosion. The Ursaluna just protects, but Hitmonlee gets knocked out by an Iron Head. So whatever Hitmonlee is here to do, we don't get to see it in this game. But now we see the Mimikyu probably going for Trick Room. Ursaluna does take a lot from that Iron Head. It'll knock out Duosion with a Facade, probably to make sure that the Trick Room can't be reversed or anything like that. Mimikyu does set the Trick Room up. Here's the Clefable. But we see no Follow Me as a Headlong Rush takes out Excadrill. Clefable just KOing Ursaluna back with the Moonblast. That works too, I suppose. But now we see that it's bulk up Mimikyu. Mimikyu, I guess, trying to be a late game win con itself. And sure enough, there's the Indeedee in the back. It will not activate a Psychic Seed on Hitmonlee, but it will still set up the Psychic Terrain. And threaten a strong Expanding Force. Tyranitar is immune, but then that has to watch out for a Play Rough from Mimikyu, I would think. Tyranitar actually giving up its immunity. Terastallizing to the Rock type. So that's probably here to boost its offensive power into the likes of Charizard and Jumpluff once again. However, now that we know that it's Terra Rock Tyranitar, it has nothing to help it resist Ursaluna or Hitmonlee, and also they won't be able to click Earthquake next to it. But Clefable breaks Mimikyu's Disguise. Tyranitar is not weak to this Play Rough and only takes about half from it. The Rock Slide will chip these Pokemon back. Indeedee goes for the Terra Fighting, probably trying to land a Terra Blast into Tyranitar or something, but it flinches, being slower than Tyranitar in this Trick Room and taking that Rock Slide. The Rock Slide could win this game. The Clefable also is able to, go for a Moonblast into Indeedee. So Indeedee went for its Terra there to try to probably take out the Tyranitar, but missed its one shot. Clefable knocked it out. However, we see Mimikyu knock the Tyranitar out with a Drain Punch, get itself nice and healthy again. Not that healthy, actually. And for all that effort, Mimikyu drops to a Moonblast in the end game. And so, the Peaceful Porygons will have to find an adjustment here. Whatever they were trying to do with the Hitmonlee did not work out in this game. And the Ursaluna was able to get a couple of quick KOs, which was pretty exciting. But in the end, leaving it up to Mimikyu to close out the game by itself. I mean, it might have worked if Indeedee had just landed an attack and not flinched that one turn. Maybe I shouldn't be too critical of the Porygons game plan when that one flinch felt so huge. But we'll see if they bring a different one to game 2. As we do see Gastrodon and Mimikyu now leading against Tyranitar and Excadrill once again. Gastrodon immediately probably a threat to these two Pokemon, so we'll see how the Garchomps handle that. Excadrill, however, makes sense they'd be worried about the Mimikyu too, and they will just break the Disguise immediately and try to knock it out, I assume. They remove a Covert Cloak, but Mimikyu does not get KO'd. It gets a lot of recovery from a Drain Punch into Tyranitar, as Gastrodon knocks out Excadrill. Good first turn for the Porygons. But Tyranitar is still there, and they did not set Trick Room up. But Mimikyu is, of course, going to take less damage from Knockoff now because it doesn't have an item. So, depending on what the Garchomps bring in next, Mimikyu might be positioned to keep doing damage here. We see the Clefable come in. Gastrodon's leftovers now removed. Mimikyu lands a big Play Rough into Clefable before dropping to a Moonblast. And Muddy Water from Gastrodon will finish Tyranitar off and knock Clefable very low. Now we see Duosion, but it's Indeedee on the other side. Indeedee, I would think, can pretty safely just rip an Expanding Force or something. It'll be resisted by Duosion, but it should knock out Clefable, no problem. And because the Porygons did not set Trick Room and prioritize damage with the Mimikyu, Indeedee is the fastest Pokemon on the field. It does get that Expanding Force off, showing the Life Orb. Gastrodon drops to an Energy Ball. Does Indeedee have coverage for Duosion? Oh, there's still Ursaluna in the back. Okay. But also, yes, it does, as it knocks out the Duosion with a Shadow Ball. So, once again, the Porygons, it was a different game plan, but once again, they kind of mixed and matched their different possible game plans. Bringing Mimikyu and Ursaluna suggests a Trick Room game plan, but the lead Mimikyu, Robbie probably recognizing that he could set up for an Indeedee endgame instead, and that Indeedee would be faster than Pokemon like Clefable and Duosion, prioritizes damage with Mimikyu, and also with Gastrodon. Gets a couple of KOs, or at least gets the Tyranitar low. How did the Tyranitar get knocked out? That was by Gastrodon, yeah. So it gets a couple of KOs, and then Indeedee is able to come in and clean up. No Trick Room needed. And this is what makes the Peaceful Porygons so difficult to take on, right? They have a lot of different game plans that they can mix and match in creative ways and sort of Every team they bring has multiple layers to it, so even if you stop one mode, there's probably another one in the back. We watched this happen to Spooky in Week 1, and we'll see whether the Liberty Guard and Garchomps can figure it out now in Game 3 of Week 5. But it's Ursaluna and Gastrodon leading this time. Funnily enough, the 2 ground types are on not on the Garchomp side this time. There are 3 ground types on the field, but yeah, the one with 2 of them is not the team you'd expect. We see the Skarmory here probably trying to check that Ursaluna that has come to both games so far. Probably also a reasonable check to Hitmonlee. Okay, Excadrill switching out to Duosion as Skarmory sets Tailwind. Duosion takes that Headlong Rush not super well, but the defense drops on Ursaluna might matter. Duosion will drop to a Muddy Water here. Skarmory also doesn't take that super well, but it does get its Tailwind up. Now we have Clefable coming in. But Skarmory, I mean, Skarmory is a decent defensive check to Ursaluna, but it doesn't have a ton of offensive presence, although maybe it can do some damage after Ursaluna landed that Headlong Rush earlier, but it does feel like they're kind of dependent right now on Clefable to make the most of this Tailwind to do damage, which isn't the worst thing, but isn't the best thing either. Porygons double protect, kill a turn of the Tailwind, and then get Ursaluna out of there and Indeedee in. Indeedee taking a lot from the body press and KO'd by the Moonblast, but that leaves Gastrodon free to throw off a Muddy Water that does a lot to Skarmory, not as much to Clefable. Now we see the Hitmonlee come in and activate its Psychic Seed, and so even with both of these Pokemon in Tailwind, I think we're going to get a chance here to see what Hitmonlee can do in this game. Skarmory protects, and Hitmonlee throws a big Poison Jab into Clefable, doesn't KO, but does roll the Poison. Hitmonlee drops to a Moonblast. The poison ends up not mattering as Clefable is knocked out by Muddy Water. But the bigger thing, of course, was Hitmonlee was the fastest Pokemon on the field after Unburden, even with Tailwind up on the other side, and it was able to do enough damage to Clefable and also occupy Clefable's attention so that Gastrodon could finish it off. Last Pokemon for the Garchomps is Excadrill. It's going for Terra Ground. It's going for Earthquake next to Skarmory. It's doing big damage to both opponents, but not knocking either one out from the HP they were at, as a Headlong Rush will finish Excadrill off. Skarmory had a chance to take a KO here, assuming it's carrying an attack. Well, yeah, we know that it has Body Press. Had a chance to take a KO here, but instead it sets the Tailwind. Even though the Garchomp's Pokemon were the fastest on the field already, so Skarmory might have been able to win this one with if it had just taken a KO here with the Body Press into either one of these. But maybe they expected Excadrill to knock something out. In any case, Skarmory's still the fastest Pokemon on the field. It has a chance to do something. It just protects this turn. Gets a little bit of recovery. Tear Poison on the Gastrodon. Skarmory finally taking a KO on Ursaluna. And is Skarmory going to do this? It's stalling at its own Tailwind, but that doesn't matter. We've established it doesn't need that. However, both these Pokemon have leftovers, and Gastrodon with the Poison Terra now resisting the Body Press. Skarmory goes for a Drill Peck. Probably not a whole lot of EVs, if any, invested in that, and Gastrodon does survive and knocks Skarmory out. And so, well, both Pokemon were trying to protect and get their leftovers recovery. It's kind of a wash that Skarmory protected when Gastrodon would have done that anyway. But yeah, I think if the Skarmory just played more aggressively there, doubled into something in case Excadrill missed the KO, could have taken out one of these Pokemon the same turn that Excadrill went for the Earthquake. And they were already faster than the opponents. They didn't need the Tailwind on turn 5 here. Then I think the set could end in a very different way. The Liberty Garden Garchomps were legitimately very close to taking this one against a very tough opponent. But they in the end, the peaceful Porygons pull it out and improve to 5-0, still the only undefeated team so far this season. And as much as that would be a fun set to end on, there are still 2 left. Up next, we have the varsity Farmboys taking on the drowsy Torkoals. The Farmboys leaving their Chatots and the Greninja behind this time, but they have the Nightmare defensive core of Blissey and Garganacl supported by Comfey, as well as redirection from Magmar. And we see the Venusaur here as well, maybe looking to take advantage of an opposing Sun mode. There is no opposing Sun mode, though. Instead, we see the Snow duo of Glaceon and Alolan Vulpix. I think that makes decent sense. Glaceon is reasonable offensive threat into the likes of Venusaur, although it's not easy to play into Mienshao or Blissey or even Garganacl, so this will be still an uphill battle for the Torkoals, I think, probably. They can set Tailwind with the Noivern. I don't know if the Shiftry will want to just blow itself up this time. It got better results not doing that last time, but it does have the option to threaten a lot of physical damage into Blissey, plus it can target the grass weakness on Garganacl, though it does have to watch out for Magmar. And then we have just strong, hard-hitting Pokemon in Dusk, Lycanroc, and Clawitzer. So let's see how the Drowsy Torkoals approach breaking through this very bulky team. Mienshao and Garganacl lead against Explosion Lover, Shiftry, and Glaceon. Glaceon going immediately for the Terra Ghost. That will, of course, avoid Fake Out or fighting coverage, and also help it take a possible Salt Cure. Instead, the Fake Out goes into Shiftry, which does flinch. Glaceon looking to set up with Calm Mind. That's an interesting approach here. I mean, if it can get enough boosts, it might be able to break through, although the Blissey, if that's in the back, is going to be hard for it to deal with. But I don't know how many boosts it needs to put in some significant work here, but hey, maybe we'll find out. Shiftry switching out to Vulpix. That'll also help Glaceon. Well, it's not an Ice type anymore, so it doesn't get the defense boost. It probably is running Snow Cloak, though. But it doesn't miss this, or it doesn't dodge this knockoff, and it takes a lot of damage now that it's a Ghost type. Goes right for a Blizzard, no fear of any possible Wide Guard, and no Wide Guard comes out. But it does less than half to Garganacl. See, this is what I was a little bit worried about. Glaceon is a strong Pokemon, but if you're setting up with Calm Mind into this much bulk, you probably need multiple turns of setup to break through. Garganacl not breaking at all. In fact, it's going to be harder to take down now that its Moringa Berry is activated, and it lands a Salt Cure into a Glaceon that's already low. Won't KO this turn, but Glaceon doesn't have much left in it and has to give up its boost now. And yeah, I do think, this, as I've been suggesting, I do think Calm Mind is just kind of too slow as setup goes into this team, though it's an interesting attempt for sure. Now we see Wide Guard from the Mienshao. Garganacl takes the chance to recover. Shiftry is in. It'll knock Mienshao out with a Fake Out. And Vulpix disables Garganacl's Recover. That's a cool tech too, but Garganacl has now, after this Iron Defense, +4 defense, +1 special defense. It's plenty hard to break even without Recover. Here's the Comfey. Garganacl is another way to get healed now. Shiftry switching, or excuse me, Noivern switching in. We see a big root on the Comfey, so extra recovery. Is it extra recovery or extra damage? Or both? Something from moves like Draining Kiss. Well, Draining Kiss is the big one. And both these Pokemon are weak to it. Comfey showing Psych Up, copying the defensive boosts from Garganacl. So Comfey, I keep talking up Comfey as a support Pokemon with Floral Healing, but we've actually seen the Farmboys a few times use Comfey as a possible setup win con, and this is no exception. The Comfey is one way or another giving itself extra recovery on its attacks with the big root, and now we see it at +4 defense and +1 special defense, thanks to the Psych Up. Massive offensive threat already to Noivern and Shiftry, and Garganacl is still here, still hard to break, landing a Salt Cure into Noivern. There's a Draining Kiss into Shiftry, doesn't do too much, but how is this Comfey ever being knocked out, right? This might be the time for Explosion, except that doesn't help with the Garganacl. Instead we see a knockoff getting rid of the big root, but doesn't really get to the big root of the problem, as Comfey is still able to just roll through this team, I think. Unless the Vulpix can pull something off here. Noivern is knocked out. Vulpix is Salt Cured. Glaceon is back, but it can probably just be knocked out by a priority Draining Kiss. It does protect on the first one. It also could dodge in the snow. But that Vulpix is just not doing damage back, is it? As Glaceon is now knocked out. And it's kind of up to Shiftry to try to break through here, but what's it going to do? Land a huge Leaf Blade crit? Well, Vulpix helping hand into Leaf Blade. No crit. It's a +4 defense Garganacl. No doubt a crit would have KO'd, but Shiftry also just not able to take the Draining Kiss very well once the Comfey gets moving again. And yeah, the Drowsy Torkoals, they made a couple of different attempts there to break through that Garganacl, but just couldn't do it. And the Comfey was so hard for them to deal with. Like, I don't know what you do if you're on their side of this set. You might just need that Leaf Blade crit. Maybe you can bring Lycanroc and get, I don't know, something with Tough Claws, and like, I think Drill Run has a boosted crit rate. Before we go to game 2, let's find out what a big root does. Okay, it's not extra damage, but it is extra recovery. Yeah, so all the harder to deal with when that Comfey is boosted. And we'll see if it can just run away with game 2 like it did in game 1. Comfey leading this time with Mienshao against Lycanroc, there it is, and Noivern. Lycanroc switching out to Vulpix, obviously pressured by this fighting type Mienshao here, which will just throw a close combat at Vulpix immediately and knock it out. So these turns of snow are the only ones that the Torkoals are getting this time. We see the Glaceon come in. Immediate Wide Guard from Mienshao, Tailwind into Blizzard, but it's stopped by the Wide Guard. Yeah, the Farmboys just brought too many defensive tools for this team to deal with from what I've seen so far. Draining Kiss does a lot to Noivern. Draco Meteor back into Mienshao, but it has the Focus Sash. Now we see the knockoff into Glaceon. It will land a Blizzard this time, and it actually does reasonable damage to Comfey through the 2 Calm Mind boosts. But now Garganacl is back. And here's the Lycanroc. Gets chipped by the Draining Kiss, but it can take another one. It's already at 2% though. Close Combat one-shotting Garganacl, boosted by the Tough Claws. So they have broken one Pokemon, but the Comfey still there, still a problem. Taking that Blizzard reasonably well. Now the snow is gone, the Tailwind is gone. Comfey doesn't get much recovery here, but it does knock Lycanroc out. We see the Blissey come in. I kind of had a feeling it was lurking in the back in game 1, and here it is now. Blissey also setting up with Calm Mind. Noivern protecting, avoiding the KO from the Comfey. But now that there's no Salt Cure threatened, Glaceon can go for its own Calm Mind. It takes a lot from that Flamethrower, though. We see Terra Steel Noivern, still knocked out by the Draining Kiss, trying to survive but not able to do it. We see some discussion here in the chat. Farmboys coach pointing out that a double freeze still can win this game, but they're not going to get it, as Priority Draining Kiss will knock Glaceon out here. So yeah, the Torkoals definitely brought some creative techs to try to figure out this defensive team, but the Farmboys won. They brought so much setup, so much bulk. The Comfey as a win con is something we've seen multiple times this season, and it's really hard to deal with when it's supported by Salt Cure, Wide Guard, throw a Blissey at the special attackers. And then on the Torkoal side, I think just hitting hard with the Lycanroc was the best tool they had. We saw it knock out that Garganacl in one hit, which was really solid and a good adjustment to lead it after not bringing it in game 1. But the other stuff that they tried, I mean, it was a good effort. I do think it was worth the try, but the Calm Mind Glaceon is just too slow to try to break through this team, especially when the Farmboys Pokemon are setting up in parallel, right? Like maybe some kind of Archaludon game plan the Terra Ice Glaceon could handle, but Calm Mind Comfey, Calm Mind Blissey, Moranga Berry Garganacl is just too much for that one Pokemon to deal with. And then, of course, also relying on Blizzard for damage and freeze chances into the Wide Guard Mienshao didn't really pay off for them. The Farmboys claim another victim, still a very difficult team to deal with, and it's very interesting how they're playing this bulky core. But still one set left, and it is the Foraging Furrets taking on the Florida Falinks. This set just finished minutes before whenever I started recording, and we see some familiar faces from the Furrets and also an unfamiliar one. So the Furret itself is here again. We've seen them try Choice Specs Hyper Voice stuff, trying to do damage with the Furret, but it does also have support options available to it. We see the powerful Rain duo of Politoed and Kingdra. We see the Serperior that's put in work for this team week after week. But the electric types are left behind this time, as instead Gothitelle is here, able to trap anything on the other side except that Dragapult or a Terra Ghost or Shed Shell Pokemon if they have any. But we also see the Shroomish. I don't know what the Shroomish is doing here. I mean, the only thing I can think of that Shroomish does is Spore, but I don't know necessarily why they've chosen this week to bring that. However, we have seen the well-balanced attack from the Falinks relying on multiple Pokemon to combine their coverage to pull out the wins. So maybe just interrupting their pivoting with Shadow Tag, or fake out pressure from Gothitelle, or even just landing a timely Spore can be how the Furrets get an advantage here and get their Serperior going or their Rain Core going. And on the Falinks side, they have Metagross, right? No Metagross, but then it's kind of fodder for Kingdra and like even Bellibolt in a lot of matchups. Instead, we see the Sylveon and the Dragapult bringing the Dragon and Fairy types of the Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Dragapult will be the fastest Pokemon in this matchup, other than, I think, Kingdra in Rain. Sylveon is able to help check that Dragon type, and it brings a lot of special bulk against the Serperior and Kingdra, but it's still going to be hard for that Pokemon to take hits, I think. Probably relying a fair bit on the Dragapult, the only Pokemon that can safely pivot out of Gothitelle, and also an offensive threat into a lot of this team. Then we have the Thwackey, which can also be an offensive threat into the Rain Core with grassy terrain. We have the Electabuzz able to redirect attacks and support a Dragapult or Sylveon. So okay, I'm starting to see the vision as I talk through this, right? You probably are leaning a fair bit on the Dragapult, but the Thwackey is a good offensive check to some of the main threats. The Electabuzz can support it. The Venomoth can support it. Venomoth will probably not take too much from a Leaf Storm from Serperior. And I don't know what it's going to do. It has poison coverage. It can maybe set up with Quiver Dance, and then we see the Diglett may be able to trap something. So we got Shroomish and Diglett in this matchup. Be interesting to see if one of them puts in work. Game 1 will start off with Politoed and Kingdra immediately on the Furrets side against Electabuzz and Diglett. I almost just said the nickname instead of the name of the Pokemon. That would have been a little bit funny if I had done that mistakenly, but I managed to avoid it. Kingdra going straight for a Water Terra, probably just going to throw off a big Muddy Water or something, but it is Muddy Water. Diglett showing the Focus Sash. Of course, the Furrets probably can't switch out here, so what are you going to do except try to attack through this? Politoed following up with another Muddy Water. Electabuzz protects through this, but the Diglett is knocked out. No more trap on the Furret's side. We see Terra Water Sylveon. Should take these Muddy Waters reasonably well. Does, however, take an accuracy drop, although Politoed makes up for that by missing Electabuzz. Electro Web does decent damage back, and let's see what Sylveon can do here. It goes for the Hyper Voice. It connects into both targets. It does not knock anything out. Kingdra no longer a Dragon type right now, but Sylveon does get its Throat Spray boost. Furret switching in. I was just pausing to look at the chat, but nothing, no insight on the set there. Electabuzz, yeah, Electabuzz's speed control for the Sylveon looks very strong, but Kingdra is still faster, able to KO Electabuzz. Sylveon does protect through this. Now we see the Venomoth and the Shroomish. Furret also outspeeding Sylveon. No more worries about the redirection, and instead of that Specs Hyper Voice that we've seen before, this time it goes for a double edge and knocks Sylveon out, and all of a sudden Venomoth stands alone. It is going for Quiver Dance. We see Toxic Orb on the Shroomish, so presumably Poison Heal. Venomoth protecting on that Furret double edge and a Spore, but it's in a tough position here for sure. Bug Buzz will knock out Furret, but Venomoth now put to sleep by the Spore. As we do see the Shroomish putting in work, Politoed will get a chance to finish Venomoth off here. Here's a mandatory sleep turn. Politoed going for Perish Song and Shroomish setting Leech Seed. And they also still have Kingdra. So yeah, Venomoth is just going to run out of time, I think, to knock out all of these targets. Okay. It knocks Kingdra out. The Furrets are down to their last two Pokemon. Shroomish setting up a substitute? Actually not ideal for the Furrets there, because Bug Buzz is a sound move. It'll go through substitute. It'll probably still knock the Shroomish out. I think the better Shroomish play there is to just keep spamming Spore every turn, right? And then if the Venomoth wakes up, you have a chance to put it back to sleep. But let's see. Let's get to the end of the turn. Venomoth's Perish count is at 2, so it needs KOs in both the next two turns. So actually, if they just protect both their Pokemon, they're fine. But if for some reason they're not carrying Protect on something, not likely on a Perish Trap team, the substitute actually does conceivably give the Venomoth an out, but probably not. But yeah, they're just going to Protect here on the Bug Buzz. Politoed actually not protecting. Oh, wait, okay. Substitute baits them into it. The substitute and Spore threat baits them into attacking Shroomish, and then the Politoed doesn't need to protect. But Venomoth, unable to knock anything out this turn. It will KO the Politoed here. It definitely has me questioning whether the Politoed has protect, so that might be something for Ninja Meerkat to think about in Game 2, but I wanted to see Shroomish put in work, and it delivered. And of course, if you don't know, in a Perish Song end game, the slower Pokemon wins. So even though Shroomish also had a Perish counter on it, because you know it's going to be slower than +1 Venomoth, Venomoth is knocked out first, therefore Shroomish wins. And the Shroomish, you know, I was never sure why they drafted this Pokemon. I was never expecting to see it put in work this season, but really proving its worth to this Perish Trap core, as it's able to, well, make it that much harder for the opponent to do anything on the Perish turns, and that much easier, therefore, for its teammates to kill those turns. And the Foraging Furrets putting up a great game plan here, just blasting things immediately with the boosted Muddy Water, Rain boosted, Terra Water boosted in Kingdra's case, spread damage from both of their Pokemon, and then they had the Perish endgame in the back to close things out. Really well done. In Game 2, I don't know how Ninja Meerkat is going to adjust to that, and instead of speculating, I'm just going to jump in. Furret and Shroomish leading now against Thwackey and Diglett. I wanted to see Shroomish and Diglett, and here they both are once again. Furret going straight for the Terra Normal. It will be flinched by this Fake Out, I think, and then Endeavor Diglett knocking it below half HP. Maybe knocked out by Grassy Glide next turn. Of course, Shroomish is unable to put the Thwackey to sleep with Spore because Thwackey is a Grass type. It can, however, put Diglett to sleep, but neither of these Pokemon are able to switch out, so Thwackey might be able to just take a KO next turn. We see Terra Stellar Thwackey. Okay, that's interesting because it could just run Grass Terra to boost its Grass damage, so I wonder what coverage it has. Maybe U-turn for Superior and also Shroomish. Kingdra coming in. No Politoed available as both of these Pokemon presumably are trapped. Shroomish also missing the Leech Seed into Diglett. Muddy Water will knock Diglett down to its Focus Sash, but miss Thwackey. Thwackey has already used the Stellar boost on its Grass attacks, but Woodhammer will still do a fair bit in grassy terrain to this Kingdra, and I would say put it at risk of Grassy Glide KO. Right? However, the Diglett is now finished off, so Kingdra or Shroomish can switch out this turn. They don't. Venomoth comes in and protects. Thwackey dodges another Muddy Water. This time it Woodhammers Shroomish. But Shroomish is going to get recovery pretty quickly with the Poison Heal and the grassy terrain, even as it misses its Leech Seeds. And the Muddy Water is starting to chip these Pokemon down. Also gets an accuracy drop into Thwackey. Venomoth this time lands his Bug Buzz and knocks Shroomish out, and a Woodhammer from Thwackey will finish Kingdra off. The accuracy drop, no problem so far, as the last Pokemon for the Furrets is Politoed. We see Sylveon in the back for the Falinks. Politoed landing a Hydro Pump, knocking Venomoth out like a menace. The Terra Stellar Thwackey, I believe, will get its Stellar boost on this Fake Out, right? Not that, though it still doesn't do a lot of damage, but single target Hyper Voice chips the Politoed down pretty nicely, and Thwackey can Grassy Glide from here for the KO. So the Thwackey adjustment from the Florida Phalanx putting in a lot of work in this game for sure. The Furrets also leading the Furret this time. And the Shroomish, maybe they really seem to like. I actually am not sure that's a strictly competitive decision. They really seem to like to try to get the Furret going when they have the chance, but that did create an opening to get the Phalanx back into the set as they were able to trap Furret with the Diglett and knock it out. But yeah, the main adjustment here is the Thwackey just putting in so much work against, well, this whole Foraging Furrets lineup. But the point is, Thwackey, like I said, strong offensive check to Kingdra and Politoed. So after the Phalanx early game were overwhelmed in game 1 by that duo spamming water attacks, Thwackey was the perfect adjustment to come back in game 2. And now we'll see what the Furrets have for that in game 3. As we finally see the Superior hit the field, once again with Furret. We see Thwackey and Diglett on the other side. Assault Vest Thwackey. I guess we must have seen that already, but I missed it. Makes a lot of sense, this matchup. Terra Ghost Superior will knock Diglett down to its Sash and get a Leaf Storm boost immediately. But Diglett, I was going to say landing the Endeavor, but I forgot. Going for the Endeavor into Superior, but stopped because it's now a Ghost type. Would have been a great play, but this one Terra type was the counter to it, and they had it. So good prep there from the Foraging Furrets. Furret going straight for a Giga Impact, like an absolute menace. One-shotting the Thwackey. that was by far the best Pokemon for the Falinks in this set so far. Furret. I might owe an apology because I was not familiar with its game. Oh my god. The Venomoth coming in now. But Serperior will get to +4 with a KO on Diglett. The Falinks already down to their last 2 Pokemon. Venomoth looking to set up with that Quiver Dance. And here finally is the Dragapult. I talked it up as maybe the key to their game plan, but we didn't actually see it until right now in Game 3. And it has its work cut out for it against this. But, I mean, it's not going to take a Terra Blast from Serperior very well. At least it's not afraid of the Furrets attacks, I guess. Venomoth protecting. Dragapult going for Dragon Darts, but I don't think that it's knocking anything out. No, it isn't. And like I said, not taking a Terra Blast. Furret just ripping another Giga Impact. And Venomoth once again trying to make its last stand, showing the Stellar Terra, knocking Furret out with a Terra Blast, but at the cost of its special attack boost, and it takes the Terra Blast back from Serperior, but there's still 2 more Pokemon here. Here's the Politoed. Stellar Terra Blast missing the KO on Serperior. And Venomoth is gone. Game 1. The Foraging Furrets. Overwhelming the opponent with Water-type damage. And then closing it out with a Perish Song endgame. Game 2. The Florida Falinks. Adjusting with the Thwackey as a great offensive check to the Pokemon that had done well before. Game 3. The Foraging Furrets. Bringing Serperior for the first time in the set. Setting up so quickly with those Leaf Storms, with the perfect Terra type to avoid the Diglett's attempt at counterplay, and then overwhelming these Pokemon, not just with the Serperior, but also with the absolute menace Giga Impact Furret. That was a great set, and a great one to end this week on. And if you're watching this, I hope you'll be right back next week when, by the way, our Halifax Masquerade Men take on these very same Foraging Furrets. It's sure to be a good one. See you then.